everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I am a graduated master's student from the University of Oxford with a degree in US history, and this fall I'm heading to Yale University for my PhD in history and African American studies. One of the most common questions I am asked is what you can do as an undergrad in order to prepare yourself for graduate school. I have clients all the way from freshman year to their senior year, helping them prepare for applications and helping them navigate the world of academia so that way they are best prepared to apply and gain acceptance to the schools of their choice. I went to UCLA as an undergrad as a transfer student. I transferred in my junior year, so I only had 2 years at UCLA, and I took all my prerequisites in community college. And while I was at UCLA, I wrote an honors thesis. I did other independent research projects and a variety of other things in order to prepare myself for graduate school, so that way I would have everything I need in order to be an ideal candidate. And today I'm going to share all of my helpful tips. I'm going to tell you all of the things that I tell my clients. I'm going to share information that was shared with me by graduate students, by professors, and give you all of the inside secrets on how you can best prepare yourself for graduate school or law school while you are an undergrad. So we're going to be breaking this up into a couple different categories. First, we're going to talk about specific classes that you should be taking. We're going to talk about relationships with professors, your GPA, opportunities, taking the GRE, and also doing independent research. So this video is going to be a little bit long, but stick around because I've got a lot of important information in here for you all. And this video is for anybody that is an undergrad that is thinking about going to graduate school. And while I studied history, this information is definitely applicable to any field, whether you are in social sciences, humanities, or even STEM. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it since this video is going to be jam-packed with a lot of information for you all, and I want to make it as digestible as possible. So first, we're going to be talking about coursework and the things that you should be taking within your major and outside of your major in order to prepare you for graduate school. So in the humanities and in the social sciences, a lot of times what you're doing in terms of taking classes is based on lectures and seminars, whereas in STEM, you're going to be working on labs as well as lectures, and perhaps the requirements for your major are going to be slightly different and have a little less wiggle room. But in the humanities and the social sciences, there's typically a little bit of room for you to take classes outside of your major and learn other methods from different areas of study. You want to take classes from other areas that are going to be applicable to your major. So for example, while I was an undergrad, I was a major in history and a minor in African American studies. A lot of the classes I took within the African American studies or history departments actually crossed units between both departments. So any classes I actually took counted for both my minor and my major. And there is a distinct reason for that. I wanted to make sure that I was applying historical methodologies as well as social science methodologies, theories such as racial theory or feminist theory within my history work. So being able to develop my skills in the area of African American studies was definitely helpful to my knowledge and my research as a historian or a want-to-be historian, essentially. One important thing that people ask a lot is how you actually develop a research question and how you end up developing a research project that will lead you into graduate school. And the greatest misconception about graduate school is that you can kind of just come in with any idea and just go with that. The people that are most likely to get into the top programs are people that have a very distinct project that they want to be working on. So you're going to want to make that your goal while in undergrad, is to kind of develop a couple different research questions that you would like to explore as a graduate student. And the way that you do this is by exploring a variety of classes. I actually came into UCLA thinking I wanted to study political histories in early America, and I actually ended up shifting and studying social and legal histories of enslaved women in early America and into the 19th century. So ultimately what led me there was taking a variety of classes on American history and African history and African American history, history of slavery, and that actually helped me kind of develop some questions in my head. And I actually have a document on my computer where I log all of the questions that I hope to answer in a research project someday. I would say just explore as much as you can. Mind the footnotes when you're reading, when you're doing the readings for your class, whether it's in history or in social sciences or even in the hard sciences such as in STEM. When you are looking at the readings, if you are looking at research that has been published, make sure that you're kind of mining through the footnotes and thinking about questions that have been left unanswered. You want to make sure that you can find certain gaps in the scholarship and find a way to develop that into your own project. So for me, I was doing readings on the history of slavery, and I actually was looking at slaves who ran to the British during the American Revolution. And I had the question, how many actually joined the British and how many were actually freed with Lord Dunmore's proclamation? It's not important that you know what that is. I will do a video on my honors thesis within the next couple weeks, so keep an eye out. But ultimately, I just had this question, which ended up leading to a 45-page undergraduate thesis. So all you need is one question that you can develop and that you can really dive into looking back at the scholarship, and that's what gets you the research project that will get you to grad school. So the way that you get there as an undergrad from the very get-go is take classes that sound interesting to you. And while you're in those classes, be very cognizant of doing the readings and asking questions, going to office hours, and doing the work in order to figure out which questions you would like to explore as a graduate student. And then from there, I would also recommend taking very specific types of classes. So in my last informational video, I talked about what it's like to study history as an undergraduate. And in that video, I talked about the difference between lectures and seminars. So I'm going to give you guys a quick summary. So lectures is basically where a professor will stand in front of the room, present a presentation such as a slideshow, and they will give their lecture. And you are meant to basically, as an audience, take notes, regurgitate that information, and prepare for exams or prepare to write papers. The actual interaction you have with your professor is rather limited unless you actually go to office hours or talk to them after class. So my recommendation for anybody that is considering going to graduate school is attend seminars. So seminars are basically about 10 to 20 people and one professor, and it is a concentrated conversation, discussion about readings, about primary sources, about research, etc. And that is a way to develop relationships with your colleagues, with the other students, as well as with your professor. But on top of that, it actually allows you to go more in depth into the material. And there were many times in class where somebody had asked a question that I wrote down, and that is something I want to explore in my research. So I think that taking concentrated classes such as seminars or being really cognizant of attending office hours and going to discussion panels is really important in helping you develop those questions. So the next part is developing relationships with your professors. So I recommend that anybody, even if you're not entirely thinking about graduate school at the moment, always develop positive relationships with your professors and with graduate students and TAs. The reason for this is that you may or may not need letters of recommendation in the future. So you want to do as best you can in your classes, but on top of that, you actually want to develop relationships with your professors that are going to write those letters. You want to make sure that they can write the best letters possible. When I applied for my PhD at Yale, I actually submitted a total of 6 letters of recommendation, and 5 of those were from my undergraduate institution. And the reason I was able to do that was because I developed positive relationships, very close relationships with many of the professors I got to work with at UCLA. So how do you do that? First of all, attend office hours. I cannot stress this enough. You need to go to office hours. You need to develop the relationships with your professors. You need to get them to know you on a personal level. You want them to want to invest in you as a student. And it also opens up the opportunity for you to get on their research projects, especially if you're in the field of STEM. It helps you get to develop a personal relationship with them. They have an investment in your success and in your future, which will have a positive impact on your grades and your GPA. And then on top of that, they may be willing to do independent research with you. So going to office hours is incredibly important, but here is the part that is even more important, and the part that people do not talk about nearly enough, which is go to office hours with a purpose. Do not waste a professor's time. Make sure that you are valuing their time by asking very specific questions. I made sure that whenever I went to office hours, I had a specific question or a set of questions that I wanted to ask that professor. Whether it was talking about a paper that was coming up and how they tend to grade and how they tend to evaluate written work, or to ask about their research, or to ask about their opinion on a book that I had just read that I knew was likely in their purview, or to ask about graduate school, or to ask about research opportunities. Always go to office hours with a purpose. It is very obvious and very evident when a student comes to office hours unprepared and is just coming to office hours to show up at office hours. And it is also very evident the students that only show up at office hours when a midterm or a final is coming up and they have not been attending classes. So not only should you be attending your classes, but you should be attending office hours regularly. I attended office hours pretty much every week, if not every other week, with every single one of my professors. I made sure that I told them my story, they knew my goals, they knew what research I was trying to pursue, and therefore they ended up having a vested interest in my success, my grades, and helping me. And I actually created great relationships with my professors by doing this. I consider them to be lifelong mentors, and I still am in contact with them. And so developing genuine relationships with your professors on a professional level is immensely important to your success as a graduate student, but also as an undergrad. It's going to help your grades overall. And so 100% attend office hours no matter what. Okay, so the next part is talking about taking opportunities. So in pretty much every institution, there are usually additional lectures or seminars that are put on. I know at UCLA, I tried to attend at least one talk per week, whether that was at the law school or whether that was in the history department. I wanted to make sure that I was attending those lectures. So this works in a variety of ways. One, it's just interesting. It will help you develop more research questions. Again, expose yourself to as many experiences and as much knowledge as possible because it will help direct you in the long term. Two, it helps you develop relationships with students. This is a way for you to meet other people. It is a way for you to actually meet industry professionals so you can meet other academics. And on top of that, the one thing that I learned very early on as a professional athlete was that the best thing that you can do to gain opportunities is to always be seen. And in attending these lectures, a lot of the professors that I was taking classes with would see me at these lectures and say, "Oh, I remember you. You are in my Tuesday History of Slavery class." So that way I actually ended up developing even more in-depth relationships with my professors because they saw me not only in class and in their office hours, but they actually saw me attending lectures and showing dedication to knowledge, dedication to ongoing interest in the subject. So I attended a lot of lectures related to African and African American history, as well as political activism. I attended a lot of lectures on law, and in that way I developed a lot of relationships with professors, but also industry professionals, and also gained a lot of knowledge and had a really good time doing it. So try to attend as many lectures as possible at your institution or elsewhere. If you are in community college, look for a local university that is also putting on talks. They are often publicly available, so take every opportunity to at least once a week go to a talk and meet up with other people and use that as an opportunity to develop yourself professionally as a future academic. So the next piece is get to know your TAs and graduate students. So the TAs in your class are often going to be PhD students. I also got to take graduate level courses as an undergrad, so I got to actually meet other graduate students and ask them questions. Ask them how they got there, ask them about their research. They love talking about their research. I know I do. And I, as a graduate student, know that I would do anything to help an undergrad who is passionate about their research and is passionate about the subject of history. So graduate students are very open to sharing information with you and to helping you along. They needed people to help them along, so they are more than happy to provide information for you. So use that as a wealth of knowledge and a resource. Talk to graduate students that you see on campus that are teaching your classes and see what information they may be able to provide for you, whether it's about that specific graduate program that they're in at the moment or the application process. They have a lot of knowledge, so definitely reach out to them. Or if you have any other questions and you don't know who to reach out to, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk about graduate school, undergrad, anything related to research and accessing higher education. So the next piece is GPA. Obviously, it goes without saying you want to keep the highest GPA you physically can, but ultimately what matters is your major GPA and making sure that you are getting good grades and developing good relationships with your professors and classes that are going to be important to your graduate work. For example, if I had failed an early American history class, that probably would not bode well for me becoming an early American historian and then applying for a PhD. So you want to make sure that you have a high GPA. On top of that, if you can get honors, of course, go that route. But ultimately, what you need to do is be taking classes in your area of interest. I will tell you guys a quick anecdote. So when I transferred in as a junior, we were required to take this prerequisite seminar. And there weren't any seminars that were particularly in my subject of interest. So I just decided, okay, I'll just take this one class on peasant culture in medieval Europe. And I hated it. I really didn't enjoy the class. I couldn't follow. I didn't find the material all that interesting. It just wasn't for me. And I wish I had just dropped that class and taken another, because it was one of the lowest grades I got at UCLA, and he didn't like my writing. He didn't like my work. I felt so discouraged. And once I finally studied something that I enjoyed, I realized that it was a lot easier to get better grades when, one, I was engaged with the material, two, I was invested in the material, and three, I actually had something in common with the professor, because I like going to office hours, but in that class, I had I did not know what to ask. I had no interest in the material. So make sure you're taking classes that are going to pique your interest. Some of them, of course, are going to be a little bit more dry, but make sure that you are taking classes where you are engaging with the material and you are maintaining your GPA. So the next piece is taking the GRE. I did not have to take the GRE in order to apply for my master's at Oxford, but I did have to take the GRE when I applied for my PhD at Yale. If you want to know more about the difference between US and UK master's programs or going directly into a PhD, I will go ahead and link my video on US versus UK PhD programs, and that'll tell you a little bit more about the application requirements and the differences between the two different types of programs. So in short, in the United States, you have to have an undergraduate degree, but you do not need a master's in order to go into a PhD program. So that means that likely you will need a GRE. Some schools don't require it, but many do still, unfortunately. So what you want to do is sign up for a class or establish a study routine in order to make sure that you are able to take the GRE before you begin your application and that you get a score that you're happy with. I actually scored very low on the GRE and I still got into Yale. So I don't want to say don't worry about the GRE, because you do need to get a good score, but it is not the end all. The most important aspects of your application are going to be your written sample and your letters of recommendation, your GPA, and your statement of purpose. So while your GRE matters, it does not matter as much as the other components. So just keep that in mind. And it also depends on your field. It depends on where you're applying, because some committees weigh the GRE more heavily than other aspects of your application, whereas other programs look at it more holistically. So just, again, keep that in mind. And now we're going to move on to the most important piece, and this is the last piece that we're going to talk about today, and that is independent research. If you want to go to graduate school, you need to develop an independent research project. And I tell this to my clients. I am an admissions consultant for undergrad and for graduate school, and the one thing I tell clients the most is that you do not want to apply to a program with a general idea of your research. You want something very specific. And the reason for that is that they want to be able to see how you are going to develop in their program. They want to know who they can line you up with. They want to know what kind of classes you're going to take. And if you come in and you just say, oh, I want to study everything, I really love history, that's not going to get you very far. So what you want to make sure that you do is be very specific about your research project, and that can change. Just because you apply with one research project does not mean that you cannot shift during the program and study something else. Also, your undergraduate research does not have to be the same as your graduate research. So while I wrote an undergraduate thesis on slaves that ran to the British during the American Revolution, my graduate work is very much focused on legal histories of enslaved women in the colonial period. So very different topics. They may seem related, but they are actually quite different and use a very different set of methodologies. So all you have to do when you then apply for graduate school is craft a statement of purpose that talks about the difference between your undergraduate work and your graduate work. So let's move on to discussing how you actually do that undergraduate work. So first of all, most schools will have you write an undergraduate thesis or an undergraduate dissertation, whatever it is that your school calls it. Some schools do not. UCLA actually did not require you to do an undergraduate thesis. It was voluntary. And it was a year-long process. You had to have an advisor who would sign on to the project, and then you would be working on this independently for a year. And while your advisor was there to help you, the research is done on your own, in which case you need to write a section of that dissertation or that thesis about methodologies, about resources, and what primary sources you're using, etc. And again, this is for humanities, so this may be slightly different for STEM or the social sciences, but ultimately the general structure of the dissertation is about the same. And then the next portion is actually going to be your own research, whether that is you developing a hypothesis in the lab or you are actually going out and doing your own field work and visiting the archives. You need to be able to develop a research question and a research project that is wholly your own. Obviously, it doesn't need to be as unique and as monumental as, say, a PhD dissertation, but it should be unique. It should have some intrigue, and it should show that you have a grasp on the methodologies of your subject matter, and that you know how to write well, that you know how to use these resources, and that you will then be a good graduate student. So that independent research is incredibly important, whether it's a thesis or an undergraduate dissertation, or you write a project on your own. I know some schools, especially internationally, do not require you to write an independent research paper, but single out a professor, develop a relationship with them, and then ask if they'd be willing to sponsor a project with you where they work one-on-one to help you write your own paper. I actually ended up writing an undergraduate honors thesis, as well as working independently with a professor that I really liked getting to know, and she ended up writing one of my letters of recommendation. And during that independent research project that I did with her, I actually developed the research question that I ended up exploring at Oxford. So doing independent research, developing a unique independent question is incredibly important to applying to graduate school, especially at the PhD level. So we've now reached the end of the video. I jam-packed a ton of information into this one, so I hope that it was helpful for you all. I want you guys to leave me a comment down below whether you plan on going to graduate school, what you plan on studying, what is it you are passionate about. I just want to be able to kind of share a love of knowledge, a love of academia in the comments, and get to know what you guys are studying. I hope that this video was helpful and useful and that you got a lot of helpful tips from it. And I have lots of videos like this one coming up. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you guys are not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It helps my channel out a lot. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.